This time on Watchers of Tomorrow, we discover that the transporters are magical.
Oh, I am Gapwin, and I am joined, as always, by my good friend Dr. Isix.
Hi.
And today we are going to be talking about Star Trek's The Enemy Within.
Ooh.
Now, before we get started, in general, I've been kind of going back in episodes and putting content advisories on stuff when we get to something in the discussion section that I feel like people might like to know is, coming up in the episode.
Yeah.
This episode, I want to put the advisory here in the actual recording because, well, a lot of stuff we don't know what we're going to get to in the discussion section because we can kind of meander on and get to wherever based on what we're talking about in the themes of the episode. This one has some troubling stuff in the actual synopsis itself. There is like a fairly realistically acted sexual assault in the episode that we're going to have to cover in the synopsis, so I just wanted to give people a heads up for that one, because this episode itself is a little more troubling than any ones that we've hit so far.
Yes. So, on that note...
Yes, so I guess we should just jump in here. This episode was written by Richard Matherson. I'm bad at last names.
Yes, Matheson.
Matheson, there we go. I think this is his only Star Trek writing credit, but he was one of the most prolific writers of the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, I got his IMDb page up here. Yeah, he's written for a lot of things, looks like.
Yes, he was a prolific writer, probably best known to general audiences as the author of I Am Legend.
Oh, yes.
Which is actually one of my favorite books.
I have to admit I've not actually read it, but I hear good things.
Yeah, it's really interesting. If you saw the recent movie starring Will Smith, that has absolutely nothing to do with the book, so...
More of a inspired by situation,
yeah,
right?
Much more of an inspired by, with studio interference that ruins the ending.
Yes.
The entire point of the ending. But I'm going to go on for that for too long, so...
Yeah, I've seen the alternative ending, and I highly recommend folks check that out if they can.
Yeah, I hear that one's much closer. So he wrote that. He's also responsible for, like I said, a lot of Twilight Zone episodes, including Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, which also starred William Shatner.
There's something on the wing.
Yes, that episode entirely. Also wrote for several other of the time TV sci-fi anthology series. I believe did some work on The Prisoner, if I remember correctly. Just a lot of, basically name a TV show from this era, and he's probably written something for it.
Well, I would try to name some things, but I'm looking right at the list of names, so I'm probably not a good person to be asking about that. So
okay.
A lot of these I haven't even heard of.
Other than that seems to be about it. We don't really have many guest stars this episode. It's a very core cast episode, so nobody really else to introduce. We just have an author that I've heard of for this one, which I found kind of interesting.
I guess there's the Fisher character who shows up, but he's just sort of there for a little bit.
Yeah, some minor characters that weren't even really listed as guest stars in the stuff I was looking at, so that's too bad for them, I guess.
Yes. Sorry, dudes.
All right, to the synopsis. We begin with no captain's log this time.
How weird.
Yes.
Germanic flying over a planet.
Yep, the planet unnamed, I think, in this one.
Yeah, I don't remember noting any names, so yes.
Mm-hmm. The crew is on an alien planet where crew members are digging or something.
Yeah, they're doing crew member stuff,
Yes.
as you do on planets.
Kirk approaches Sulu, who is holding a dog in a pink fuzzy costume with some sort of forehead horn.
Yep, and it's hilarious.
Yes.
When I saw this, I was like, really, guys? Really? Come on.
So I was reading somebody who had watched this as a kid when it first came out, and they said, when I watched this as a kid, I totally believed that was a alien. And then the older I got, the more ridiculous it became.
Yep. Which I guess kind of works, I guess. It just, as being older now, it's still Still really silly looking.
But I was just thinking about it, and I think excluding plants, this is only the third alien life form we have seen at this point.
Yeah, because you got the salt creature on the man trap.
Yep.
And I guess got the big giant head, right?
Yeah, so the energy creature, and then if you count Spock, I guess that's a third one.
Oh, true, yeah.
And then this here would be the fourth, if you count Spock in the aliens that we have seen. But so far, it's a very alien-light series.
Yeah.
Sulu mentions that the temperature is starting to drop, and Kirk tells us that the temperature goes down to negative 120 degrees at night.
That's a bad time. You want to bring a coat and maybe, I don't know, a underground bunker.
We hear rocks falling off screen, and a crewman yells. We see crewman Fisher, who has fallen off of a cliff and cut his hand and is now also covered in yellow stuff.
Wait a moment. Isn't it the trope that, when rocks fall, everyone dies? But no one died here.
Well, no styrofoam rocks came falling down on their heads.
Oh, good point.
It's only the styrofoam rocks that hurt people.
Yes. this weird, like a yellowish dust doesn't really do anything.
No.
At least not yet.
Well, it doesn't kill you immediately, apparently. Kirk tells Fisher to beam up to the ship for medical attention. Scotty on the ship begins to beam up Fisher, but this big blinky red light on the console starts going off.
Oh no. Something terrible is happening. Clearly, Fisher's in danger. Is he going to bite it now?
Apparently not. Scotty says that he engages something called a cogitor engagement, which I looked up. And it's the word is some sort of position that a bishop can hold in the church. That's like an apprentice to a higher bishop. But it's also never mentioned again in the entire series.
I don't get it.
I know. I was just confused by what he had said, because he does something to make the transporter work after the blinky red light has happened.
Maybe it's something like Scotty calls a device that, and everyone just kind of is okay with him calling it that, and then he forgets about this later.
Yeah, or nobody knows how this thing works, and he just makes up words.
Yeah, it's the interface, hybrid, intermix phase shifter. That's the enterprise, redistributor. Yeah.
Yes. It's exactly that. Fisher is then beamed aboard, and he says that he fell into some sort of weird yellow ore. Scotty scans the ore and says that it's magnetic, and sends Fisher off to be decontaminated, which I thought the transporter could do. Last episode, we had some blinky lights that made the transporter decontaminate people. But, oh well. And then Scotty comments that the transporter acted like it had a burnout, which I guess that's a thing transporters can do. We haven't heard of this before or since.
Well, maybe again it's Scotty just making up stuff, and everyone's like, yeah, you actually mean this, but you're just saying it in a weird fashion.
Yeah, could be with Scotty.
So maybe I should add that to my award list here.
Scotty makes up words award. Kirk signals through the Enterprise that he's ready to beam up. Scotty tells him to wait a minute while he checks on the transporter, and he sends his assistant out to get something double checked, but doesn't think it's important enough to wait for his assistant to come back, and beams up Kirk anyway.
Yeah, this is just the captain here. No need to have an assistant here on this important piece of equipment that rips people apart atom by atom and assembles them elsewhere. Come on.
Well, he's just like, okay, go out and get this thingy so we can double check that the transporter's working properly, but then immediately beams up Kirk before he comes back to double check whatever it is. But work safety not exactly the best here.
Nope.
Kirk beams aboard, looks dizzy, and holds his head and stumbles around. Scotty helps him out and to go to his quarters or sick bay or something. Just says, I'll help you here. And then Kirk says not to leave the transporter room unattended, but Scotty goes, no, I'll be fine.
Scotty, you are very headstrong, and yeah.
Well, also, the captain just told you not to leave your post unattended, and you're like, yeah, no, it's okay.
Yeah, whatever.
And as soon as they leave, of course, it is not fine. Because, that's how this stuff works. The transporter activates all by itself, and a man appears with his back to the camera. He turns around to reveal Kirk!
Dun, dun, dun!
And he's lit from below, so you know that he's, evil or something. like he's
Yeah,
telling a spooky story at camp.
Yes. This one time on the Enterprise, I beamed aboard, and then I beamed aboard again. But I was still on the ship the first time.
Dun dun. We then get opening credits and our first captain's log, where Kirk tells us that unbeknownst to himself or the crew, the transporter has created a strange duplicate of himself.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yes, Dupe Kirk weirds around the transporter room for a bit, stroking the console. I guess it's like technically his mother or something.
I guess. Like, well, I'm here to appreciate you and be kind of weird about it.
Scotty's assistant comes back and Dupe Kirk leaves without saying anything, and then he pauses at the door to stare backward at the assistant and smiles weirdly.
There's that creepy smile again.
Yes, the other Kirk, who I'm just calling Kirk for simplicity, because they keep kind of referring to him as like default Kirk.
Yeah. Well, I put in my notes, good Kirk and evil Kirk, but you know.
Yeah, which they haven't gotten to yet, but yeah they do kind of they talk about them that way, but they don't really act that way towards them. It's weird, and we'll get into that in a minute. But
yes.
So Kirk is back in his quarters with Scotty, who tells him that he should go to the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Kirk says that he will, but just stays in his quarters instead. And Rand is in there, doing yeoman things, apparently. She hands him the ship's manifest and then leaves, and Kirk lays down to take a nap.
So I have a question. Why is Rand in his room?
Apparently, that's where she has to do her yeoman stuff.
This is your room and also my office. Okay.
I guess? I don't know. In sickbay, McCoy is blow-drying Fisher's hand.
As you do, it's how you heal in the future. You just
Yeah.
apply some hot air and you're good to go.
And he spritzes like a spray bottle of something on it. So I guess they have future healing juice instead of dermal regenerators.
Yeah.
Which I keep making fun of it. This like is sci-fi stuff. It just looks better in Next Generation, which is where I was introduced to it. So
yes.
This isn't an actual criticism. I just find it amusing.
Yeah, it's more of appreciation of the camp.
Yes. All right. McCoy, that's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Jokes with Fisher a bit, kind of good-naturedly, which is not like when he's joking with Spock and he's just being racist.
Yes, and in fact, in comparison, it's like McCoy, you're like chatting up Fisher here. You seem like warm and friendly. This is like, I've never seen you like this, McCoy. What have you been evil duplicated as well?
Yeah. Kirk enters, and I think we're not supposed to necessarily know which Kirk this is, but it's very obviously Dupe Kirk.
Yes.
He demands Saurian brandy.
Mm-hmm.
McCoy ignores him, tells Fisher to get back to work because he has no sympathy for being clumsy, which is just weird, bad doctoring.
Well, maybe McCoy is like, well, the captain's here. I need to be a jerk now. So
yes, that's what the captain expects.
Maybe that's the secret. Maybe in the future we need to be paying attention to when McCoy's harassing Spock. If Kirk is there, maybe that's what's actually going on.
He's just trying to impress Kirk with his being mean.
Yeah.
So Fisher tries to talk to Kirk on his way out, but he's just leaning on the wall and ignoring Fisher, so he leaves. Mm-hmm. McCoy asks what Kirk wanted, and he again demands brandy and grabs McCoy. McCoy just opens up what apparently is his sickbay drink cabinet.
I just found that so hilarious. It's like, all right, well, if you want some booze, here, I got a whole cabinet full of it.
Yeah, sick, like apparently it's medicinal.
Yeah, it is. This was big in the 60s, so the concept of medicinal booze and things like that is still kind of a thing. It's it's kind of falling out of favor at the time, but
Yeah,
so.
And I guess he's supposed to be an old school doctor, so
yeah.
He doesn't. He just gets people drunk before surgery.
I'm going to be using this futuristic device to rearrange your organs. So here, have some vodka.
Kirk grabs a bottle and then leaves. We get close-ups of Kirk looking dopey in the hallway and weirdly happily drinking from his bottle. He then sees Rand's quarters and goes inside and starts to kind of look derpy at the camera. Kirk is in his room shirtless. Spock comes in and says that McCoy has asked him to check on him. Kirk asks what's going on, and Spock says that the doctor told him that Kirk was acting like a wild man and demanded brandy. Kirk suggests that this was one of McCoy's practical jokes on Spock, which I think demonstrates some of the problem of having a crew that doesn't like each other.
Yes. Yeah, it's like, well, we have life and death situations all the time, and, well, if, you're not able to communicate very well with each other, then the people that really should know what's going on end up not knowing, or you get bad information, and, bad situations tend to persist, like this one.
This whole scenario could have easily been taken care of 6 or 7 times if any of the characters on this show knew what they were doing as officers.
Yes.
Oh well. In the transporter room, Kirk, who is now in his dress uniform for some unspecified reason, it's just probably definitely not so we can easily tell who's who.
Clearly.
Yes. And Spock, who's just in his normal duds, they're informed that the transporter is doing weird stuff. Scotty holds up the fuzzy horn dog from earlier. Okay, I wrote it as fuzzy horn dog and didn't realize how bad that sounds till I said it.
Give it nothing but a hound dog. That's also fuzzy and horny.
Yes. Okay, that's my mistake. That's on me. It says that they beamed it up, and then an evil dog suddenly appeared in the transporter.
Oh no, evil dog!
And he's got it in his transporter box.
Yeah, you just happen to have a bunch of crates around here. Just in case something we beat them up that you don't like, we just put it in here.
Now they say that they can't use the transporter until they figure out what's going on, because what if this happened to a man?
Well, what if it happened to a man?
Well, to demonstrate that, we cut back to Rand entering her quarters, where duplicate Kirk watches her play with her hair a little bit. She notices him, asks if he needs anything. He tells her to call him Jim, that she's too beautiful to ignore, and that they both have been pretending for too long.
Oh dear.
Yeah, this is the bad bit. He grabs her and sexually assaults her by grabbing her, forcing him in close, saying "don't fight me," pushing her down to the ground, restraining her. She looks incredibly upset during this whole scene. It's actually it's well enough acted to be upsetting.
Yes, it's like this is making me uncomfortable, and it's quite clear that she's doing all she can to get out of the situation and escape.
She's trying to run out
because and it's I want to sort of emphasize, and it's she's doing this well enough that it's like, yeah, this is someone who actually is demonstrating what it looks like when you're in danger.
Yeah. So, this does not look pleasant, and so this scene is acted very well. It's done very well. It demonstrates how upsetting this is.
Yes.
And we'll get into it in a minute, but it becomes more upsetting later, not because of the scene itself, but because what they do with it later in the episode.
Yes.
She manages to scratch Dupe Kirk, which makes him let go, and she tries to run away, but he catches her. But luckily, the door has opened at this point. Fisher is outside. She yells for him to get Mr. Spock. Yes. Fisher runs to the intercom and starts to report that there's been an attack, but Dupe Kirk jumps him and starts beating him up.
Well, I guess in that case, Rand has an opportunity to escape the situation. But, kind of sucks for Fisher.
That whole scene, like I said, well acted. Done well enough to demonstrate that it's an upsetting thing that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Now we get into some of the crummy bits. So Kirk is surprised that someone has said that he tried to rape a crew member because he was just resting in his room, apparently.
Well, you could be lying to us now, Mr. Kirk.
Yes, which is apparently something that never occurs to anyone.
Captain lie? Nonsense! He's always truthful with us and everyone forever.
So Spock is holding the brandy bottle that Dupe Kirk had taken from sickbay. Says that he found it in Rand's room. Kirk and Spock go to sickbay to figure out what's going on. And then on the way, they apparently just miss duplicate Kirk in the hallway, who's swings his hand out into camera, showing that it's got blood on it.
Yes.
He kind of pointlessly wanders around the hallway and then goes into Kirk's room where he starts to suck on his own bloodied hand.
He's mugging for the camera, flailing about, being kind of crouched over, I recall, right?
Yes.
sort of like I'm in bad shape and I'm angry and in sort of a weird mental state, and now I'm going to go act weird elsewhere.
Yeah. Which I guess is just demonstrating that he's out of the way for the time being.
Yes.
So in sickbay, Rand is telling Kirk and Spock what happened. I think this is just kind of a quirk in the writing, but she's actually describing a completely different set of events to what we saw.
Yeah, that was kind of weird, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm guessing that that's just something where they wrote one scene and then the other scene and didn't go back in the editing to like match them up exactly.
It's like, yeah, it's like, it's okay. Maybe they recorded this episode, this part of the episode first, and then did the actual bit of acting for the earlier scene.
Yeah,
and so so maybe you have an issue like that, or it's like, well, this is what's in the script. Doesn't matter if you acted it differently. This is what you're going to say. Okay.
Yeah, and she's visibly uncomfortable in this scene again, like crying, can't look up at people. But the way this is staged, it has Spock and Kirk, who, as far as everyone knows at this point, is the person who attacked her.
Come on, you don't want to put the guy that she's accusing of attacking her in the room with her when you're asking about what happened.
And they're both just standing over her while she's sitting there. So like this super intimidating situation for someone who just went through a horrifying experience.
Yeah, it's like, it's sort of like, well, tell us everything that happened. And yeah, that's really not cool.
She says that she's scratched her attacker, Kirk, and Kirk says, no, look at me, I don't have scratches, it couldn't have been me. She just starts questioning her memories of the event, instead of anyone going like, oh, it couldn't have been him, something weird's going on. She just starts going, oh, maybe I don't remember what happened, which is something that happens to people who have just been through a horrible traumatic experience. They're basically just gaslighting her the entire time.
Yeah, that's awful. Kirk, Spock, get the hell out of here. Let someone professional take care of this.
Yeah, so after she starts questioning her memories of the event, they say that Fisher also saw this happen. Kirk says that it couldn't have been him, but then Fisher dramatically reveals himself out of the door to the other room and says, it was you, sir. I don't know. It's done dramatically and weird.
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, you guys are being really kind of a jerk to Rand here, and it takes this guy over here to get you to believe her at all.
Yeah, they don't believe her until she's, seconded by the guy who saw what happened.
That's the term problematic is kind of overused these days, but this is kind of one of those situations where it kind of applies.
Yeah. So Spock says that the only logical explanation is that there is an imposter on board, apparently. So it makes sense from everything that we've seen. I have no idea how they reach this conclusion from what they're supposed to know at this point.
Yeah. There is, it kind of goes back to those, once you start reducing the possibilities, maybe the more reasonable options are the actual things we should be looking at. Like Kirk, actually, there is only one Kirk, and there is, because you've already demonstrated in this very episode the ability to use advanced technology to heal wounds. So Kirk could have done this, attacked Rand, and then got his face fixed up. And it's like, oh no, I'm not injured at all. And now everyone's being called like, oh, come on, Rand, he's fine. Yeah, that doesn't make any damn sense, guys. Spock, yeah. Your logic is flawed.
Yeah, they never once really even entertained the idea that Kirk might be lying to get himself out of a bad thing.
Yes, and that's kind of absurd.
This entire thing, we'll get to more of this at the end in the discussion, but like this whole thing is just how not to run a sexual assault investigation.
Exactly.
Which you'd hope would be better by now in your bright, optimistic future visions.
Well, sometimes our idealism is still limited by the flaws of ourselves.
Yes. So, next captain's log, we are told about the landing party. Remember, there used to be a landing party that we cared about?
Yes, they're still on the planet because they haven't been beamed up.
Yes, it's getting cold because the transporter definitely made a bad duplicate Kirk. Yes.
So we don't want to be beaming up the rest of the folks, even though it could be potentially hilarious.
Yes. Scotty explains.
Can I pause for just a moment here? So if for some reason you had a teleporter and it wasn't creating these sorts of complications where like one of them is sort of a good, in quote good, one of them's quote evil, actually really evil in this case. But it's just sort of like, they're just slightly different. Then that's cool. Then you could potentially effectively generate thousands of people before your transporter exploded, and then you have like, well, I guess we have enough crew for like 12 ships now. Neat.
Yeah, they could just start randomly cloning people with this, apparently.
Yes.
Scotty explains that the transporter probably acted up because of the weird yellow ore that Fisher had on him, but he has no idea what's actually going on with the thing.
Because Scotty doesn't understand magnetic powder.
Kirk says that he can't leave the men down there or they will freeze to death, but Scotty says he's doing everything that he can. Kirk orders search parties for his double, but Spock says that he can't risk killing the duplicate because they don't know what will happen. So Kirk starts giving long, rambling orders about how they need to set their phasers to stun. Spock questions what to tell the crew. Kirk says just to tell them what's happening because, weird space stuff is happening and I can tell them what's going on.
Yeah, because that would make sense to get the crew informed so they can actually do their job. And it's like, well, here's the weird Kirk who's all attacking people and ranting and being kind of a jerk. Maybe we should not treat him like the normal captain.
Yeah, maybe. Spock says that would make Kirk look imperfect, and he doesn't have the right to look imperfect because that would make the crew lose faith in him and thereby his ability to command.
Spock, you're failing at logic again.
Yes.
It's like if the crew is as good as it's supposed to be, it should understand that, hey, there's weird space stuff going on. Deal with it. And also, this is all resolved.
This idea that a commander has to appear perfect at all times or the people under him are going to stop listening to him, it's just kind of absurd.
It's very kind of old school, military tradition to a degree, but it's also sort of one of those, I guess, what's the word? I'm forgetting the exact term for it, but it's sort of one of those sayings, like this is sort of the ideal that you should be striving for. But as with any ideal, sometimes when it hits a actual situation, it doesn't have all the answers.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of the ethos of the show's idea of command. He doesn't actually have any particular ability to command. He just has been granted this position, and as long as people think he's perfect in this position, it'll be fine. But the minute they find out he's not, it just loses everything.
Then you have a bunch of Klingons showing up to challenge him for command or something.
Yeah.
I guess.
Anyway, Kirk says that he knew that, but he doesn't know why he just forgot.
Kirk, you're kind of losing your mind. You're coming a pushover, and you're letting Spock tell you what to do. That's good? Question mark.
I guess. He orders Spock to tell him that if he seems like he's slipping, that he should tell him. Not like, if I seem to be slipping or being weird, take command. Just if I seem to be slipping, tell me.
Yes. It's like, I still want to be captain. Just, whatever.
Yep. In the captain's log, Kirk says that he is losing his will and decisions are becoming more difficult.
And I think the words I noted down, something has happened to me.
Yes.
And I was like, duh.
Kirk on the bridge reports to the ship that there's been an imposter aboard, and it's pretending to be the captain. They can identify the imposter because of the scratches on his face. Spock reminds him about the no-killing thing.
Mm-hmm.
Dupe Kirk has been listening in on the announcements and starts yelling about how he's the captain.
Yes. I'm the captain.
He starts knocking over stuff, including a computer terminal, which I thought was attached to the desk, but yeah.
Yep.
He then grabs some makeup that apparently Kirk just has in his room and covers the scratches on his face.
Time to go into disguise, though my eyeliner's still quite obvious.
I mean, it's fine. I was looking at this and it was weird because why does the captain have makeup in his room? And then I realized I was kind of stuck in their 60s mindset of men don't wear makeup, but it's the future. They can, do what they want. It's actually kind of a nice departure from the weird masculine ideals we've seen elsewhere in the show.
Quite right there.
Oh, Dupe Kirk opens the door, tells the first dude he sees to give him his phaser, and then knocks him unconscious.
Sucker.
Sulu, back on the planet, reports that it's already negative 20.
So I have to do this at some point this episode. Sulu! I'm freezing with Sulu! Carry on.
Okay. Spock says they tried to send down heaters, but they duplicated and now don't work.
Cool.
They don't really explain how this works, because apparently anything they transport duplicates. But why does an evil heater no longer function?
Wouldn't it, like, just not heat as well or heat too much?
And why does the good heater not function? Wouldn't it work better?
It doesn't have enough fire, you see.
And then if they, like, why don't they send down, like, blankets and coats and things? Because a good, like, an evil blanket would just be all scratchy, and a good blanket would just be super comfortable and warm.
Or you could also, like, enough materials to, like, build a shelter, or, maybe, if you have broken heaters, it's like, well, we need to fix these, so here are some parts that might be of use, and they shouldn't matter if they get duplicated or not, because it's a wrench.
Yeah, apparently
what's an evil wrench
they
gonna
really
do?
don't do a very good job of explaining why they can't transport them down stuff. But suffice it to say, the transporter has done transporter magic that makes it impossible for them to help the crew in any way. It is reported that the crewman from earlier who got knocked out was found outside of the captain's cabin, and that the imposter called him by name and took his phaser.
Obviously, this duplicate knows everything that Kirk knows.
Yes, and then Spock posits that they can use that to predict where the duplicate Kirk is going to go. All they have to do is ask Kirk where he would hide from a shipwide search.
Brilliant.
Kirk says he would hide on the lower decks where engineering section is and no one goes, which just seems like the first place you would look anyway.
Yes, so that he's trying to avoid people, trying not to be found out, trying not to be captured. Where's the best place to go? I know, the mess hall. Wait, no, engineering.
Kirk and Spock go to the engineering deck alone.
Mm-hmm. As you do, because, you have to remain strong and perfect at all times, even though, yeah.
There's a line in here a little later, like Kirk says, if I'm going to be the captain, I need to start acting like the captain, which apparently means stupidly taking risks you don't need to.
Exactly.
Spock reminds Kirk to draw his weapon, then comments on how they should have brought backup, but Kirk says his stupid macho things about being a macho man. I'm going to be a macho man.
And then I'm going to flex, but I'm going to be kind of meek about it because I'm, losing myself here.
Yes. We see Dupe Kirk crawling around on top of some engineering boxes, I guess. He drops down and starts to creep after Kirk.
Dun.
They stare at each other for a bit. Kirk says...
turn first, yes.
Yes. Kirk says that Dupe can't kill him because that would be like killing part of yourself and they need each other. Spock appears behind duplicate Kirk and nerve pinches him. Dupe Kirk shoots his phaser, exploding a hole in something.
Oh no!
Yes, his phaser was set to super kill.
This is going to evaporate, annihilate, disintegrate everything between the end of the phaser and 12 light years. So there's now a big hole in the ship. Sorry.
Yeah. Apparently that never happens, which is kind of interesting. Though, in sickbay, McCoy says Dupe Kirk is about to regain consciousness, and he shouldn't give him tranquilizers because he doesn't know what his state is, being, the doctor.
It's like, I don't know how to doctor. I don't know what's going on with my patient.
Huh.
I just know he's acting funky, and I tied him up.
Yeah, they say that they should bind him, which seemed like a good idea to begin with. I don't know, that nobody... This crew doesn't function, and it keeps bothering me.
Hopefully they'll learn by the end of the series.
Yes. Kirk says that yes, they should do that, and then asks what's wrong with him. Spock says that Kirk is losing his ability to make decisions, and that this is an interesting opportunity to kind of study the human mind.
Thanks, Spock. I know you like your science and all, but this is also like the captain.
Yeah. Well, this is a weird scene. Because the doctor keeps going like, this, like, someone that we like is, like, split up and weird and dying, and you're on about like, hey, we can study the roles of good and evil, and Spock's face just lights up and goes, yes.
So if I was Kirk later, I'd be like, Spock, next time something like this happens, could you like not be real like rooting for me to be your experiment, please?
So Spock posits that he's been split into two sides. He says that the negative side is his lust, hostility, and violence, and the positive is compassion, love, and tenderness. And that it appears what makes an exceptional leader is actually the negative part, because without it, Kirk is starting to lose his ability to command.
So, he has all the ability, but none of the fire.
We're going to get to this at the end, because I'm going to spend half an hour ranting about this. But this is like so badly implemented, even with the bad point that they're trying to make. So Kirk asks what his point is. Spock says that Kirk will be unable to function as captain if he continues to decline, and that he should prepare for that. McCoy says that Kirk still has his intellect and he can fight for that, and Kirk says, but for how long? So Kirk doesn't think he has a very strong intellect, apparently.
Well, maybe he's just sort of giving up at this point. It's like, I just don't feel like it anymore.
Spock has this incredibly awkward line about how if it seems insensitive, understand it's just who I am.
Thanks.
Scotty reports that he's now found a new problem with the transporter. It's the big hole that duplicate Kirk shot into it.
You found the big hole. That's when I put my notes here, and it's going to be a problem, and they're going to take a while to fix it up.
Apparently, but I'll get to that.
Would you like to say week?
Yeah, they said a week, I think. Back on the planet, Sulu asks if they can get beamed up yet, and Kirk tells him that they're working on it. Sulu is being very jokey during this whole thing, which is actually kind of nice for his character. Yep. He asks if they can get a long rope and lower them down some coffee or rice wine.
I guess it's sort of one of those situations where, a few years back I was in a small car accident. I was okay. My back bumper was, however, not okay. But sort of after the experience, sort of this, wow, this could have been so much worse. I'm now like laughing about it. Ha ha ha. Oh God.
Yeah, well, there's an interesting study or some psychological stuff I heard a while ago that the human impulse to like make fun of and laugh of near deadly or harmful situations is just kind of a social cue to other people to be like, yeah, this could have gone bad, but I'm actually okay, so we can all now enjoy it and find it funny.
Yes, but unfortunately, Sulu's not quite okay yet, but he's probably happy he's alive still.
Yeah, well, I guess he's just trying to keep everyone's spirits up and not pretend they're not about to die. Kirk asks for an update on the transporter, and this is where Scotty tells him that it's going to take at least a week to repair the thing.
Oh, yes, okay. I got ahead of myself, sorry.
In the captain's log, everyone on the planet is still freezing to death. Dupe Kirk is still tied down, and Kirk can't seem to make decisions. Sulu is using his phasers to heat up rocks, and they all huddle around them, which is the first time we see this done. It's actually becomes like a staple of the series.
Yep, and all the way up through the more modern series. It's like, well, we're now in a bad situation, and it's really cold. Well, we got this phaser here. Let's just heat up some rocks. Set the heat rock setting, and there you go.
It is a heat rock setting because it is a wide beam and does weird stuff. Anyway, it's actually like a clever use of stuff. I like it when they use technology or whatever in clever ways.
Exactly, me too. Because you don't really require this is the technobabble explanation, and we realign the phase inhibitors or whatever, and then things just sort of work. And that's sort of like a force drama thing. This is sort of like, well, we already got this thing, we already have demonstrated what its ability is. Now we're just going to use it in new fashion.
Yeah, it's a pretty nice little. I enjoy that in the series.
Yeah, me too.
They call back to the ship where he and Kirk keep joking about how they're all going to die, and Spock feels the need to take over because the captain's not being good captain-y, and just tells them that they all have to hold on and survive.
Cool. Let's hold on and survive.
We cut to duplicate Kirk yelling while his vital indicators are moving around slowly in a way that means nothing to us. McCoy says that his body functions are weakened because of the duplication process and that duplicate Kirk is now dying. Kirk says that the duplicate can't die, and he goes over and grabs his hand and goes, "It's okay, just use your mind to think. You can think and it's all right." And then Kirk stares at Dupe Kirk. Dupe Kirk passes out, and then his vitals return to normal. And McCoy runs up and goes "Oh my God, he's back!"
Cool, everything's awesome now.
Yep.
Through the power of hand-holding.
And thinking. Apparently, his problem was that he wasn't thinking, and as soon as Kirk told him to start thinking, he's fine.
Cool. I guess they just need to communicate better.
Yeah.
Like everyone else.
Kirk monologues about how he doesn't want to take Dupe Kirk back inside him because he's evil, but he has to function as a commander. McCoy tells him that everyone has this animalistic side inside of them, and it's just what makes you human, but that Kirk's strength lays mostly in his evil duplicate. McCoy says that then Kirk has his logical and intellect and courageous side because he was scared where duplicate Kirk wasn't scared. This is pretty much the only time that they mention that Kirk has any redeeming qualities at all.
Yes. It's well, you're just kind of there, I guess. Well, you got this going, so that's good.
Spock calls Kirk to the transporters because they say that they may have found an answer. Spock and Scotty have bypassed the thingy-mabob that was supposed to take a week to repair, which made it completely pointless.
It's well, there's this horrible thing. Wait, don't worry about it.
But there was already a horrible thing. The transporter doesn't work. They then introduce a new reason the transporter doesn't work. 2 scenes later, they say that they don't have to worry about the new reason the transporter doesn't work, but the old reason that the transporter doesn't work is still a problem.
So, once again, Scotty really doesn't know how a transporter works, apparently.
Mm-hmm. And the writers don't know how to build dramatic tension.
Nope.
Hey. They say they're going to try to recombine the alien dog thing. Yeah. So
it's evil doggo.
They do that, but then the dog is not moving. McCoy runs up, and this is the first he's dead Jim that we get in the series.
It's quite dead. It's dead Jim.
Which is just, it's the most famous thing that McCoy says, and the first time he says in the series is for a dog.
Yep.
Spock enters a captain's log about how he's acting in command, but Kirk is still in command, but he's pretty much useless, but everyone's still gonna die.
I was kind of hoping there'd be, it's I'm now the captain, but that's okay because I'm logical about it, and I cannot remain in this position, or some weird sort of phrasing like that. But it ends up being kind of straightforward.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward and a little dumb.
Yeah, it's well, okay.
McCoy sends the dog out for an autopsy. Spock says he knows what the dog died of. It was shock.
Shocking.
People don't know what shock is.
No, not really.
Anytime anyone dies in something, they say they died of shock. Shock does not mean you were surprised by something. Shock is a medical term that means you lost too much blood.
Yep. It's well, suddenly you don't have that stuff moving through your body anymore that keeps your body oxygenated properly.
Yes.
So, yeah, you're just going to sort of start dying all over the place.
But they keep using it to mean he was too surprised and died.
Yeah, if you suggest there was a surprise and that caused a heart attack, now that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, but that's not dying of shock. That's dying from a heart attack. They're different things.
Yes.
So, he says that the dog died of shock because the dog didn't know what was happening. But if a person went through it, they'd live because they would know what was going on intellectually.
So they could think their way through it.
McCoy tells him that that's stupid, and that it's just a theory, and that they should check out the dog because maybe something actually went wrong in the transporter.
This would make sense.
That's why the dog died.
So this is now number 3 for Spock sort of failing at logic totally?
Yep.
I think.
Well, Spock says that he knows that this is true because he has an alien half and a human half that are constantly fighting inside him, so he knows what it's like to be split in two and that his intelligence is what lets him survive. Because that's how hybridized species work.
Apparently.
This is why mules are so angry, because the horse side and the donkey side are constantly fighting and they don't have the intelligence to make it cooperate.
And why ligers are the most cruel and evil beings in the universe, because they're just full of angst and they're not just big kitties.
Oh, yes. I thought it's because they were horrible abominations to God and man, but...
Well, that too.
Anyone who doesn't know, a liger is a crossbreed between a lion and tiger that just gets huge.
Yes, it's
I assume
fuel
everyone
dark.
knows what a mule is. Liger's slightly less common.
Probably like less than a dozen in the world, I think.
Kirk asks someone to make the decision for him. Spock goes, "Are you relinquishing command?" And Kirk says no. But then they're like, "Okay, well, we can't help you then."
It's like, well, someone command for me. You want us to command for you? Nope, not at all.
Kirk just orders them both to do the thing they were doing, which I guess is supposed to show that he can't make decisions, but both of these things are going to take time. This is like a really good order. It makes sense to both of these things take time, keep doing them both until we don't have the time for one of them. It's not like they're both working on it. They can do both at the same time. It's actually pretty good decision making.
Yeah, let's delegate and get you works. Okay, let's do that. Good. All right.
Sulu calls the ship and reports that they're cold and dead. Basically, they're going to be dead in a minute.
Oh, no.
Just like they have been. Kirk decides that this is now time to try to recombine regardless of the consequences, so he tells Dupe Kirk that they're going to go to the transporter. Dupe Kirk stands up, says he's too tired and weak to fight anymore. He then fake falls, punches Kirk out, and then, leaves, I guess.
So I think the proper line here is, fooled you.
Yep, basically. Because he's evil, and he does things like that.
Yeah, it's deception and cruelty and punching you in the face, that sort of thing.
So we see Kirk in dress uniform. I guess we're supposed to wonder which one this is, but again, it's really obviously duplicate Kirk.
Yep.
He runs into Rand, tells her that there's a duplicate on board and that he's the one that attacked her, and that the duplicate also even scratched his face to make him look similar. And then asks if he can come to her cabin later to apologize properly.
Rand, say no. Run away. Come on.
Apparently you're not allowed to question the captain in any way on this stupid ship. Dupe Kirk then goes to the bridge and orders them to leave orbit and leave the landing party to their doom.
Yeah, just because.
Kirk enters with McCoy. Duplicate Kirk orders them to grab whatever real, normal, good Kirk, whatever he is. McCoy says no. Spock just kind of walks over and goes yeah, I know which Kirk we're dealing with. No one's confused.
No, it's well, obviously the one who's being really aggressive and shouting orders is the aggressive one who shouts orders.
Duplicate Kirk yells that they're going to try to kill him and that he doesn't want to die, and he starts throwing people around the bridge. Dupe Kirk threatens to kill Kirk, but Kirk says that half a man cannot live and that it's going to be okay and they're not going to die. They're just going to live together as one person again.
We're going to be together, little buddy, forever.
They go back to the transporter. This has been another pointless detour.
Yep.
There was no reason for him to escape and go to the bridge, for no one to be confused who they were and just do the thing they were going to do 3 minutes ago.
Yep. It's well, moving on then.
Yep. Spock beams the Kirks back together again. Then he immediately comes in and goes, "Get those men back up here," I guess showing that he's got his super command skills back.
Okay. Aye, Captain. This is the good one, right? No, it's the good and evil one. Oh gosh. We're confused now. We can't operate like this. Everyone's being indecisive. Oh, it's me.
Apparently, they're going to just beam everyone up and then immediately reconstitute them the way that they just did, is the thing that I'm getting out of this. This is how the transporter works forever now.
Yeah, it's sort of, we're just going to hand wave our way through in it and everything's good. Yep. There's going to be temporarily evil twins of yourself everywhere, and they just sort of get recombined with you and you're fine.
Oh, back on the bridge, McCoy asks how he is, and Kirk says that he has seen a part of himself that no man should ever see. He tells Spock that, thank you from both of us. Spock goes oh, should I pass that on to the crew? And he goes, no, we can forget about that imposter dude now.
Let's just go forward and not let everyone know exactly what was going on, and then it's all resolved now.
Yep. Rand comes up to the captain, says, "Captain, I'd just like to say," and then he, cuts her off and says something I know, it's fine. She's no, it's not fine.
No, it's not fine.
Definitely not fine.
Rand, you need to, transfer a different ship ASAP.
Mm-hmm. Especially since then Spock comes up to Rand, says the imposter had some interesting qualities, and then smiles at her really creepily as she, runs off from Creep Spock. And that's how we end the episode.
Maybe Spock was duplicated too somehow.
Yeah. The only thing I can think is that like Spock wanted to sleep with duplicate Kirk after he saw Kirk with his shirt off, and that's where all these like tumbler ships are coming from.
Ah, that might explain some things.
Yeah, it's the only explanation I can come up with that's not horrifying.
Yeah. So, but yeah, otherwise, yeah, it's quite horrifying.
Well, end of the episode. Let's just get this little lighter thing out of the way first.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, you have a planet full of freezing people, and your transporter doesn't work. How would you solve this situation, knowing what you know about the Star Trek universe, Isix?
Well, given sort of setting aside that this is early in the series and that there's some things that weren't well established yet, I would totally send down a shuttlecraft to pick those guys up.
Yes, and shuttlecrafts, in fact, have not been conceived of.
Yep. That'll come later.
Also, the idea that there's more than one transporter room on the ship has not been conceived of.
Yeah, so it's like, well, this one's broken, but we could use the one over on B deck, right?
Yes, there's some really interesting stuff with the shuttlecraft that we'll get to when it appears. But if anybody has been watching this stuff on Netflix, they have a really good series called The Toys That Made Us that has an episode on Star Trek toys that goes into the creation of the shuttlecraft, which is very interesting.
I've heard that show before, but I've not seen it yet.
It's definitely worth a watch. So, horrifying things.
Yep, let's look at that. Check out that big elephant over there that's filling up most of the room.
Yeah. There's some other stuff I want to get to after this too, so it's not just going to be this discussion from now on. We already went into how they handled it really badly throughout this thing. They also very much let Kirk off the hook for everything. They just keep saying that it's an imposter, that's like not really him. They both want it to be not actually Kirk, but also part of Kirk, but also the most important part of Kirk.
Yes, so clearly there is, I guess there's sort of a few ways we can sort of pick apart this whole thing in a way, as far as what the reaction should be. So first off, okay, you can assume that given that there's some weird, magical transporter accident, that one or both Kirks in the situation are not in full control of their faculties, and to a degree, the Kirks that existed at that point in time are no longer technically the Kirks before or after that. And so there may be some questions about legal ramifications that sort of you can sort of muddle through there, but that's kind of the weak sauce answer. So you kind of have to confront the fact that yes, a part of Kirk did attack one of the crew members, and everyone just sort of ignoring that. And that's not cool, man. So so let's say I were to go up to someone and throw a punch at them, and my fist connects with their face, and I break their nose, and they fall over the ground, and I stand up there and say, "Oh, look, my hand just sort of went out there and punched you in the face. I apologize, but that was my hand. That wasn't the whole me." Would you buy that at all?
No, and it also would be like, yeah, part of you did this because, I was angry with you or something, which is kind of what they're positing in this one.
Yeah. So I would argue that any sort of notion that the separate Kirks are not sort of responsible for their actions at the time, and the Kirks before and after are are not also responsible for this divided states conduct is a little absurd in my view here. It's like, okay, you can sort of maybe when you get like sentencing phase, like, oh, there's some extenuating circumstances, so maybe we'll only give you 2 years as opposed to 10, but still, you kind of did it. So.
Yeah, well, quite apart from any kind of, should he be punished for this or not, you have, the person, this is, the person who assaulted a crew member, who's now expected to work closely with that crew member. Even regardless, let's say that this was a complete imposter, that they cloned him entirely, it's a completely different person.
You know, there's no reconstitution at the end. This is someone who is completely independent. Basically, your Thomas Riker situation.
Yeah. You still have, like, a person who looks exactly the same who just assaulted someone, and you never even try to address that fact.
Yeah.
Now, this is going to, like, cause a lot of traumatic problems for someone. Like you know, if someone had, like, this huge traumatic incident and their identical twin of the attacker showed up, they'd still have similar reactions. It would be an issue, and they might not be able to work very closely with that person. And it's something that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, it would be a situation where, this is a situation where the person who was the victim in the situation should not be required to ever work with that person or the person that is very similar to that person ever again. Yeah, they should basically get the free ticket to, Chancellorsville.
This is really the same kind of thing that we've seen in other episodes with, like, the way that they're kind of modeling abuse tactics, but this time they're making it okay.
Yeah, and that's not cool.
Yeah, because you kind of have this thing of, so you've got, this is, like, very much what someone in an abusive situation would see from their attacker. You have this person who's normally fairly nice and okay and easy to get along with. That's why you hang around with them.
And everyone else loves them too, and they could never do any wrong.
Yes. And then sometimes, how much depends on the individual, but sometimes they become verbally, physically, psychologically, whatever, they become abusive to you.
Yeah.
And then they will act horribly towards you for whatever amount of time. And then they come back and become the nice person again, who may even be very apologetic for what happened.
Like, I'm sorry, man. I don't know what came over me. I wasn't myself. Please forgive me.
Yeah, and that's how these abuse cycles continue. And they're modeling that in this episode and saying, like, yep, you should definitely believe that the nice guy is the one that you have from now on and you're going to be dealing with. Just ignore what happened.
Do you mind if I drop an F-bomb real quick?
I don't suppose we've really done much to avoid it on this show. So,
I think so just a warning, I'm about to drop the F-bomb. So, I think the proper response to that is fuck that noise.
Yes, I would agree with that, and I don't want it to sound like we've been kind of joking about how, like, Rands should transfer, etc. But the onus is on the establishment in this, because, like, Spock should have done something. Spock should have had the authority to do something. This entire episode, Spock should have been in command. In Next Generation, Picard would have been in command for all of 3 seconds in this episode.
It's like, well, there's something weird happening with the captain. How about we transfer control to someone who doesn't have something weird happening to them?
They do this in other Star Trek series. I know that we're just working with later writing. This is an earlier thing, but even in the military, like, something like this happens. There's an active investigation. The captain is making weird decisions that don't make sense or seems incapacitated. The first officer's just gone, I'm relieving you of command until we figure this out. Done deal.
Yes, you are, shooting at people that aren't there and babbling about, space Martians. I don't think you're quite in your right state of mind here, Captain. So we're gonna just sort of take this gun away from you and relieve you of command and hope you get better soon.
But instead, we wind up with this idea that the captain is some sort of infallible god human that we shouldn't question in any way, shape, or form, otherwise it will completely destroy his ability to command.
All hail the Overlord?
Basically. I mean, we're getting back to that Kantian idea that we discussed a couple episodes ago of people need structure. No matter how bad that leader is, never question them because it's better than not having a leader at all.
Yeah, and we already kind of expressed how we feel about that situation.
Yeah.
So.
But this was handled badly. So, more just horrible stuff. As I was looking into this, I got some other people's opinions on this. I listened to some other podcasts. There's a podcast called Women at Warp that did a whole episode on sexual assault in Star Trek that I would recommend people go listen to. It's actually very well done. And
I'm going to note that down.
Yeah, it's a really good podcast they need to listen to more of. There's some behind-the-scenes stuff that makes this worse. And I feel like we need to address that, especially given this episode.
Yeah.
So I could not find the first-hand account of this, but I have heard it said in like 3 different second-hand places at this point, that during the scene where Yeoman Rand is being interviewed about her attack, the actor had trouble crying. Grace Lee Whitney couldn't cry. And Shatner, without warning, without saying anything, without asking if this is okay for one actor to help another, smacked her across the face.
Wow.
In order to get her to be able to cry for this scene.
So I know it's sort of common knowledge these days that Shatner's kind of a jerk, but yeah, this is like not okay. And it's like, you don't just assault people. Come on.
Yeah, like she has talked about this as kind of a funny acting story in the past, and like her memoirs and stuff before she died. But it's just not. It's never okay to make physical contact with another person without their permission, especially that violently.
Exactly.
Now, this is like, actors will do this. Actors do these weird things. There's like a story from Batman where like in the scene where Batman's interrogating the Joker, they are actually hitting each other. But that is something that they like talked about beforehand. They're like, "Are you sure you want me to do this?" He's like, "Yes, I need you to actually hit me for this scene to work right for me." And that was something that they agreed on well before the fact. This was just, "Oh, you're having trouble crying? Smap."
Yeah. It's like, okay, so there's a certain level of permission in one case, but not in the other.
Yes.
And and it's like, okay, you want her to cry, then you can. Okay, we're going to try some things. Here are some things we would like to try. One of them involves slap you upside the face. Would that help you cry? And if yes, then are you willing to go through it? If yes, then sure, we'll proceed. If not, then we'll try something else. And you need to give your actress the choice on this, to give her the final say on what happens to her.
Yeah, and especially given the content that we're talking about with this episode, this is just another unacceptable layer of stuff on top of this.
Yes.
In addition to it being fairly well known from her memoirs that she had actually suffered sexual assault on set from an unnamed and unknown producer. So altogether, this episode is just, it's like so going in, it's about this thing, but it's also something that was so prevalent in the culture of the time and that was handled so badly, and things that actually happened to this actor as she's having to depict them on set. The whole thing just becomes more and more horrifying the more research I did on it.
I'm struggling to sort of have more to say, but you're hitting it pretty well down the line there. This is just so much badness. It's kind of mind-boggling to a degree.
Yeah, and I think the two main things that we can take away from this, just looking at it from our discussion perspective on what it is saying as a sci-fi concept, that in this bright, glorious future that we're dealing with, it's been continually demonstrated that women are the same level of second-class citizen that we've had them being portrayed throughout most of Western civilization.
And that is a big failing for Star Trek, period.
Yeah, and it's just it's a depressing failure of imagination that we can't see any way that this will have changed in the intervening, 500-600 years. It's also like demonstrative of the people who were writing and creating this show, that they thought this was an okay way to deal with this subject matter.
It's a lack of imagination at best.
I think
worse,
I think it's just two men who have not had to deal as closely with this kind of stuff. I think we've probably said all that we can say profitably on this.
Yeah.
But this was not handled well, even remotely. This was an upsetting episode for me to watch. It was it was also upsetting to talk about. I stopped making jokes about halfway through the synopsis.
No. I will say that the particularly upsetting, in reaction to the assault scene, that's a demonstration of what not to do. I want to make that fully clear if it wasn't already, which it should be. But there are ways, someone can be not just someone to help with initial, after an event, assault. There are things you can do to help that person, not only get things reported, recover, but also in the longer term, to help them heal, to help them become whole again. And I would really recommend folks, go out there, find resources, and see what you can do to learn how to basically behave better than what was demonstrated in this episode.
Yes.
What was shown is a guidebook of not what to do. So, but there are resources out there that you can think. And the most important thing is to listen to people. If someone's been attacked, listen to them and believe them.
Yeah, and don't start questioning their every action like they did in this. Even the stupid scratch thing. You saw that was realistic how quickly she started caving in that. Maybe that's not what actually happened. Because the way that traumatic events function, you're not remembering them the same way that you remember normal linear memory. So when you start questioning someone and start cross-examining someone and trying to look for holes in their story, you're going to find that they don't talk about it the way that you would expect them to, and that's normal. And just throwing in this maybe that's not what happened stuff.
That's bogus. You don't do that.
Yes, don't do that.
And this is, remember, right after it went down. This is when the person is basically feeling the most vulnerable. You rolling over the coals is just going to make things so much worse for them.
I just want to be clear, since we are talking about this, I don't want to get too deep into it. I don't have the resources in front of me, but also, if someone is not this upset, that's also a normal reaction. People react to these things in different ways. So if someone is not freaking out and crying and can't look people directly in the eye, that doesn't mean that the thing didn't happen to them. They're just having a different stress reaction.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier, I mentioned earlier, well, my stress reaction from that car accident. Yeah, it seemed like I was, if someone just sort of poof into existence and it's like, hey, Izzy, what's going on here? You seem really happy, and they don't see the few cars lined up behind me. Then they might say, oh, you seem to be in good spirits, so everything should be happy. No, it really wasn't.
Yeah. Just accept that people have different stress reactions. Support someone who's going through something horrible. Don't force them to be in the same room with someone who may have attacked them.
Yeah.
I don't care. We're in this minute where people keep saying this is all made up and you shouldn't completely believe people or punish people. This isn't about punishing people. I'm not telling you to go after someone who's been accused of this stuff. That's for later. Just don't force them in the same room with the person who has attacked them. Just listen to what they have to say. Be mindful. Believe what they're doing. No one's telling you to run out and start punishing people. It's not your job, so stop yelling about it on Twitter.
Yeah. There are authorities that can handle, that sort of stuff. Hopefully.
Yes, so it's not your job to try to defend someone because you think that they're being unduly attacked. Just if you don't think you know what happened, then stay out of it, and it's the best thing you're going to be able to do.
There is wisdom in realizing you don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Yes. So I think we've covered that pretty well. I want to say please feel free to contact us if you have better resources or ways you think that we should have talked about this better. I try to do research. I try to know as much as I can about psychology and things. It's something I'm interested in, but I'm not an expert. I'm not a therapist. If there's something that I said wrong in this, I want to know so that we can correct it later.
Yes. I've done my best to be mindful about this sort of thing. I know a number of folks who have been assaulted, both just physically and sexually, and it's both important to be someone they can go to and be supportive of them, but you also need to understand that it's also very hard for them to to go to people and seek help. So you need to be, I guess the word is accommodating and willing to do what's right and to not be, prickly about it. It's like, oh, do I really have to help you? Yeah, you kind of do if they're asking for you to help. They've had to go through enough already. If they need your assistance, do what you can, all right?
Yes. Just be, if you're a friend to someone who's going through something horrible like this, just be there for them. And there's also the little thing, I guess since we're going on the thing, the best piece of advice that I have heard for this is like, if you know someone who's in a bad situation or has gone through a bad situation and they seem to not want help from you, that's because they can't get it from you right then. Don't abandon them.
Yes.
Like, be around. They might refuse help from you immediately. They might refuse direct help. But if they know that you're around and someone that they can talk to and someone who's available to them, eventually they will come to you for help, and that's when you can give assistance.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we should probably move on so that we don't have to spend the next half hour on this as well. But
yeah, let's go on to something. I don't know. I could always go to my little awards list if you're interested.
Maybe as a nice little break. We've got some psychology stuff to talk about as well, but awards could be a good one to palate cleanser, I guess.
All right. Well, I guess we got the new award here. Scotty language.
Scotty just made up random tech words apparently.
I'm not quite willing to label it technobabble yet because this was just kind of what.
Yeah, well, there's also the thing. So Scotty shows up in Next Generation in the episode Relics.
Yes, that big Dyson sphere, he's crashing on a ship. There's a transporter buffer involved. Clearly he knows what he's doing with transporters, right?
Yes, but he also mentions a couple times that he would tell Kirk that things would take longer than he actually thought they would take, so he could come in under time and make up stuff. And so he probably is just making up words.
Yep.
Even just in character, it's something that seems to make sense for the character we have here.
Yes, it's all about the show as opposed to necessarily the do, though the do does eventually happen.
All right, what else we got? Bad tech things.
Well, my second one is transporters are magic.
Yep, they really are.
I think this is the first time there's a real transporter accident on the show, and it'll be kicking off a long and sorted tradition of transporters doing weird things, whichever they need to be doing for that week.
Yep. Well, we don't have the holodecks yet, so
yes.
Transporters are the magic thing that do whatever they happen to need to do for that episode.
And my third one is, of course, the Evil Twin Award.
Oh, Evil Twins. Hooray.
Yes. Now, though this one does not come with a goatee, it is still, very much that, this is the one who's supposed to be, the bad by default, and we'll try to him and ha, but he's just kind of a jerk face. So, yeah.
Well, Evil Twin Award goes nicely into the psychology stuff.
Exactly.
That we can talk about.
I almost planned it that way.
Yeah.
Not really.
Look at you.
Hooray! My ordered list was in the right order.
So, unfortunately, I didn't have enough time to research some of this stuff as I would like, but this seems to be dealing with a concept that we've hit a couple times. This one is just a little more directly, called psychic multiplicity.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is something that has popped up in therapy schools throughout history, really. Freudian psychology had a bit of this. It's very prevalent in the psychodynamic theory, like we've said. It's basically just the idea that a person is not a singular mental entity.
It's a series of tubes. A collection of components. One set of components being defined by the ego, superego in sort of framing, but other folks can have their own sort of rundowns as well.
Yeah. So psychodynamic, which we've talked about a few times, has id, ego, superego, which was very popular at this time period.
Mm-hmm. There's only two of them. How do we work this one out?
Yeah, that's a weird one with this. That's the three. That's like a three-way split. There's something called object relations theory, which was put into psychodynamic kind of Freudian stuff later. There's a whole history of psychology that don't have time to get into and only psychology students care about. But this object relations idea that kind of people that you interact with in your life kind of get internalized as different pieces of you and then kind of come out. This introduces kind of an idea of like introjects is a term that you'll sometimes hear.
I'm not sure what that means.
So that's basically you're thinking of eating a cookie and there's a voice in your head that says, don't eat that cookie, you're going to get fat. And that's because your mother told you that eating cookies was going to make you fat. So it's basically an internalized voice of a parent like telling you not to do this thing. Is like it's introjecting into your thought patterns.
What about the voice that says the cookie's delicious? I should, not listen to that other voice.
See, that's another one, and this is why I think this is so interesting. The kind of school of therapy that I like and think about this stuff through uses the term parts. You can also think of it as like sub-personalities.
So subroutines except for the brain.
Kind of, but more so that instead of being like one singular brain person, your brain actually functions as more of a collective of a lot of little people.
Yes, like that one little statuette artifact that Picard gets in the Next Generation that has all little people inside.
Yeah, that's actually a very good representation. Assuming people don't remember these things as encyclopedically as we do. There's a Next Generation episode where Picard gets an alien artifact and he opens it up and it has a lot of smaller statues inside of it. It's like this little stylized kind of dumpy statue. It looks a little like a Weeble that wobbles but won't fall down. It looks a little like that. He opens it up and it has a bunch of smaller statues inside. And it says that this is kind of the belief that this alien culture had, that a person is actually made up of a lot of people all working kind of in committee.
Out of many, one.
Yes, which is pretty widely accepted in psychology at this point. You have that idea of like subconscious versus conscious, and some of the subconscious parts of you can block off ideas from the conscious part of you. It gets very complicated, and depending on what school of psychology you're using, there's anywhere between like 3 to like 16 to 32 parts. Depending on what you're doing, they can be variable. It can depend from person to person in some cases. If someone is more interested in this, the theories that I keep coming from is something called internal family systems therapy, which abbreviates to IFS is the more commonly used term.
I like abbreviations.
Yeah, the abbreviations. There's more abbreviations. They're everywhere. But just look up internal family systems therapy. There's a lot of good resources. It's kind of more intuitive to understand. So I'd use that as a good starting point. And it's where I come from with most of this stuff.
Well, I will also, to help to remember that abbreviation, that acronym, IFS, internal family systems. It's also for internal file system.
Ah.
Oh, going back to that computer analogy I just used a moment ago.
So this episode gets into that idea that I hate, that I just hate, that there are angry, lustful, whatever, animalistic parts inside of you that are being kept in check by some other part of you.
There are only the two forces.
Yes. Well, let's get back to the horrifying stuff for a second. This has the idea again that every man has a rapist part of them inside themselves that is just being held back.
That unfortunate horn dog, but not the one in the coat.
Yes. And this is just something that this keeps coming up in this series, that this is just an inherent part of humans, is this part of you that is going to go and sexually assault Yeoman Rand.
And because this shows up here and it shows up in other media, I sometimes wonder if this sort of concept, this idea is sort of used by some folks as an excuse to justify their behavior. It's like, oh, I did this bad thing because there's just this part of me and that makes it okay? No, it doesn't.
Well, I don't know. It's either being used to justify your own behavior or thoughts that you may find scary. Because, if you look at someone and have this thought of like, oh, I would like to do this horrible thing to them, that's scary to yourself. Yeah. I think all of us have had some kind of idea that just pops in your head like, oh, I could do this thing and it would be bad. And that's somewhat scary to know that you are capable of that kind of thinking. It doesn't have to be this extreme, but I think all of us can relate to that in some way.
Yeah, the ability, though, to make it, realize this and then make a decision not to do such, not to act on this sort of thought is it makes you a person. It makes you capable of thought.
Well, there's also this kind of thing of innate traits versus socialized traits.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we have a society that is very okay with this kind of behavior. Like, even just looking at the way that we interact with what's going on right now as we record this, all the Me Too things, the more reports of sexual assault coming out, and so many people, they just make that up and do it for attention, and it's actually okay, or this is just the way humans are meant to act. There's a whole school of evolutionary psychology that goes into like, well, people just do this because in antiquity we used to like all, sexually assault each other in this old, very outdated movie version of how primitive humans used to act. And it's just, we have a society that is okay with this treatment of women, glorifies this treatment of women, tells people this is how women are supposed to be treated. So the idea that this is an innate part of people is a little silly, but it is something that we have been socialized into. Because, like, how many times do you have this story of, like, the little boy wants to ask out the little girl and she's not interested, but the little boy still has to do these grand gestures or keep pushing or fight for her love or, do any number of things to, like, win her over, or all the things in, like, Indiana Jones or other media that show, like, forcing yourself on someone is actually good and kind of romantic.
But it's not.
Yeah, it's not, but, like, we have a society.
What's what we've been doing. Yeah, it's everything's been sort of, it's like, oh, this is obviously how you do it. And then, when people attempt this stuff or think they're attempting it and it doesn't work, and then it's like, well, you're being a creep, go away, then that leads to other consequences. Sometimes it means that the guy is like, oh, I've been kind of an ass, I'm going to change my behavior. Other times they just get more aggressive.
Yeah, and we've also been glorifying masculine aggression to a huge point.
Mm-hmm.
That creates even more of this stuff. I could go on, but my general point is we have these things that a lot of people and writers, and especially of this era and this kind of storyline, say this is just an innate part of people. There's an animalistic part of you that just wants to do these things and needs to be kept in check. But from what we've seen in society now, it seems much more likely that it is a societal thing that is learned as you grow up, and there's also just a massive amount of debate and a completely unresearchable line of questioning of what is an innate human characteristic versus a taught and learned characteristic from growing up in a particular society at a particular time.
Kind of one of those situations where to study the problem you kind of need to, like, abduct a bunch of people.
Yeah, and like being able to study it would be so unethical.
Yes.
It would also be so traumatizing to your subjects as to make the data completely useless.
Now we're going to abduct some babies, and we're going to raise them on the moon in a weird society where everyone has silly hats.
Yeah,
or something. I don't know, but yeah, it's a problem that is a bit beyond study. So there's the exact specifics are all to a certain degree speculation. But given the general prevalence, there is sort of like, well, we can sort of recognize how the trends are running. So this is a good explanation for what's going on.
Yeah. Though to make matters worse, in this particular episode, we keep getting this reinforced idea that you cannot be a functional human without these parts of you.
Because reasons.
Well, see, this is the thing. I see what they're trying to do. They're trying to do you have to exist as a complete entity, and trying to exist as like part of yourself, like trying to exile part of yourself that you consider bad is not going to work, which is actually a message that I can get behind. The idea that good Kirk wants to be nice and friendly to these parts of himself that he dislikes, that's good. Being nice to yourself is a good thing. Trying to accept all these parts of yourself and work together in concert helps make you a good, functional person.
It's like, yeah, I see these warts. They are right in front of me, like literally, and they are, hostile, cruel, and this, that, the other thing, but I can look at this and say, okay, I can control the bits of this side of me that are obviously not what I want to be, and I can use what's left to build myself up, to drive my own fire, to drive my own motivations, and to give the things that I actually value the passions that they need. And that's an okay message there. It just, there's everything else going on.
Yeah, it's not a bad message. It's done badly. In the way that I come from the things, like, you don't really have, like, part of you that is anger or part of you that is hostility. Like, every part of you is its own, like, kind of personality with its own mix of emotions. Mm-hmm. It just might be more angry at one thing than another part is, and one might be more hostile to this circumstance but afraid of this other circumstance. And it's this whole thing. I'd recommend doing some more reading on it if you're interested. But
the various components are almost acting on their own sort of paradigms, their own ranges of emotions, their own sort of internal structures, so that they don't necessarily follow a set pattern that is runs across the whole spectrum of yourself. I guess in some ways it sort of reminds me of the situation where you are in a social situation and you're acting a certain way, and then someone from a different social group shows up and you start acting completely differently.
Yeah, there's that socialization thing. It is a good example of how to understand this kind of thing. Like, you act in a completely different way around your parents as you do around your same-aged friends.
Yes.
Because, different parts of you are responding to the different situations.
And those different parts can feel completely different to it, to a varying degree, depending on sort of how they've been built up and developed over time.
Yeah.
I when I'm hanging out with my dad, the things we talk about are going to be motivated by this. Usually when I interact with these days, it's sort of either one of us is trying to, sort of play a good host to the other, or, we're out together doing something. And so a lot of the sort of thinking when I'm running through my head when I'm interacting with him is sort of, okay, so how do we proceed on this sort of, I guess, almost structured plan? But if I'm just hanging out with my, like my friend Jody or something like that, then we're like, hey, let's just, what's up? It's not, we're not sort of, at least I'm not, at least on my end of things, I'm not trying to, I don't want to use the phrase keep my friend busy, but to build a structured series of events for both of us.
Yeah, you just have a different way of interacting based on the situation.
And if you don't, what languages I use, what sort of phrasing, what sort of tones of voice I use. I probably don't use this one around my dad very often, so it could be hilarious.
See, so the messaging that they're trying, the thing that they're trying to do, isn't bad. Yeah. The way that they handle it is atrocious.
It's like, okay, I'm going to try to hit the get my bow and arrow out. I'm going to try to fire it at this target. No, I just shot myself in the back somehow. What?
Yep. So evil, quote, evil Kirk, because that's how they refer to it in the episode. Mm-hmm. The only really bad thing we ever see him do is the sexual assault. Yeah. He drinks, which I guess is posited as kind of a vice, and he's mean to people. He is more it gets into physical altercations. But the main bad thing we see him do is the sexual assault, which also gets into the whole trope of here's a sexual assault to just demonstrate how bad things are, which is its own terrible trope.
Yeah.
And then everything else, he does hit someone, he assaults somebody else, but all of that is either in self-defense or in service to the main sexual assault thing. Otherwise, he really doesn't do that much in this episode.
He has dramatic lighting.
Yeah, and then good Kirk is a completely non-functional human. He loses all ability to make decisions. But he doesn't really. They keep saying he's losing his ability to command, but really he's just talking more slowly and being slightly confused. He's still making command decisions, and he's still genuinely making good decisions.
Yeah, it's just kind of takes us time to get to there.
So really what they're saying is that they just keep saying this is the most important part of you, this part of you that just horribly assaulted someone. This is the most important part of you. They sort of at one time say, well, the good side of you has all your logic and courage and whatever, but they never demonstrate the good side doing anything except being confused.
Yeah, it's so real logical there, eh?
Yeah, it's not like they have the You know, the one side is like compassionate to a fault, and the other side is just mean and evil. It's like the one side is confused, and the other side is raping people.
I guess there is a little bit of demonstration of the compassion side when he's, trying to be, nice to, the duplicate there.
Yeah, but he's only still ever compassionate to himself.
Yeah, which is kind of self-centered.
There, like when he's talking to Rand, this is supposed to be the compassionate side talking to Rand, and all he does is like, look at me, I don't have scratches on my face.
Yeah, he's not really compassionate there at all. In fact, he's just kind of tone deaf.
Yeah, he's not compassionate to anyone except for his evil self.
And then there's also sort of the interaction with Spock earlier where it's like, oh yeah, it's just McCoy causing you trouble again, mischief. And it's like, well, if you're really compassionate, maybe you could do something about that trend.
Or care that your officers are like doing these horrible things to each other.
And that they've been taken to tormenting each other on this long space voyage.
It's just more of the crew not getting along, more of the crew not functioning as a crew. I feel like this episode hugely failed on the any interesting kind of psychological or philosophical thing it was trying to say about human nature.
Yeah.
I don't know. We've been going on for a bit about this, and we had some pretty heavy topics, so I don't know. Yes. Did you have any other points that you wanted to hit for this episode?
I guess maybe if you want a still kind of uncomfortable in certain ways, but I guess, quote, better attempt at this sort of thing, there's an episode of Red Dwarf, surprise, surprise, that has good and evil sort of duplicates of the main cast members. And it also, oddly enough, involves a teleporter.
They may have just been doing this episode.
Perhaps. They're like, well, let's do it, but better? So if you're unfamiliar with the show Red Dwarf, once again, it's the last man alive, 3 million years in the future, deep space, etc., etc. The robot character, the mechanoid Crichton, is fiddling around with the teleporter pad they used a few episodes back to try to duplicate things. So trying to do this intentionally, and it's like, okay, click the button. Zaps the strawberry, the last strawberry in existence, apparently. And there's now 2 more strawberries on either side. So we actually have now 3 of them. And so, the character Lister picks up one of the strawberries, bites into it. It's like, wow, this is divine. It's just so succulent and tasty. And then he has a go at the other one. And it's like, well, it's not good. It's like meaty, chunky, almost wriggly. And then he zooms in on the strawberry and there's like maggots in it. And it's like, yes, obviously where this is going. But long story short, they try to, fiddle with the device again, and it ends up duplicating the entire ship. And so now you got the original crew members, and now, the high and low versions of themselves on 2 new versions of Red Dwarf. And they're trying to, get this all sorted out for the rest of the episode. And they don't act, because the original copies of everybody are still existing. They don't need to recombine the crew, just the ships, because the original one had issues with the fuel or something exploding. But to sort of bring it all around, it's played for laughs, the whole situation, of course, because it's Red Dwarf. But it definitely sort of demonstrates that, yeah, the good parts of someone are to a degree maybe kind of boring, kind of silly, but they're, it's like, yeah, just be kind and try to, you appreciate, each other and all that fun stuff. And they are sort of treated as, passive hippie sort of characters. But it's like, yeah, if you're being a good person, that's, being a little on the bland side might result, but that's okay. But the low versions of the crew are all radically different. So, while the high versions are all robes and togas and things like that, the low versions are in these crazy get-ups that are sort of echoing their original costumes. Lister is like this cowboy with smokes cigarette, big scars, and shoots things randomly whenever it feels like. The character, the Crichton, is this malfunctioning android. The hologram Rimmer is, well, oh god, and Cat, the character who evolved from the ship's cat, is this bestial, meat eating crazy person sort of, thing, and with all this, crazy, get up. But anywho, I've been rambling about this for a little bit, but the short of the long of my entire point this is where you say too late, is that, in each of these cases, the quote low side is, sort of demonstrating a drive of their personalities that is for each individual different. So yeah, they are all kind of jerk faces in various ways, and cruel, and and have all these sort of quote negative emotions, as sort of their defining characteristics. But how they how they sort of express those is done in sort of a different way. So it's not just like, well, this is now quote evil Kirk who is just these things, and he just makes him a bad guy. It's like, no, this person's sort of a bad person in this way, and that maybe motivates some of their behaviors in the combined version of them. And so it's sort of much more interesting to sort of look how it varies from character to character. And so maybe they should have started beaming up Sulu and everybody else to sort of look at the various high and low halves there, as it were.
Well, the way that they actually show the bad parts acting, that could have been.
Yeah.
That's just sad that that a comedy series is doing this so much better than what's supposed to be kind of the original sci-fi TV show.
Though there is a weirdness, though, in when you go into the Red Dwarf lore, that one of the, I think, the first novelization of Red Dwarf, which was contemporary with Star Trek, the original series here, I think, actually had a Captain Kirk.
Huh.
And it was complete coincidence.
Must have just been a common name or something. I don't know.
I guess. There may have been a lawsuit involved. I don't remember. But yeah, it's sort of one of those weird connections between the series that, Red Dwarf ends up lifting a lot of things from original series and sometimes Next Generation stuff from time to time. But it's sometimes, it's just played for laughs. Sometimes well, let's maybe take this idea and do something less creepy with it. Though the Rimmer's character is pretty creepy in that one. But anyway.
Well, this one has been horrifying.
It's been something.
I don't know. There's also just all this stuff I kind of remembered that I didn't mention all the stuff of they could have dealt with this in 10 minutes by just going the captain is going to be on the bridge. If you see the captain not on the bridge, stun him.
Yes.
There's just so many things they did badly. And it just seems to be this continued thing of, to make the story happen, we need to make everyone in the crew non-functioning and dumb.
Oh, sort of a original series version of all of our problems all these problems in this plot line go away when everyone realizes they have cell phones.
Yeah.
I'll just call up the police now, and they can show up here and they can help us fight this zombie killer person who's stalking us. That's cool.
Yeah, if you could function for 5 seconds as a crew, it would work fine.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that we've rambled on long enough. We're starting to push the 2-hour mark here.
Yes.
Next episode is Mud's Women.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
I don't remember. I imagine it has to be better than this one, right? It has to be. They can't do it as badly as this episode did.
Fingers crossed, eh?
I don't remember this fully. I know it has. Mud is our first, I think he only shows up twice, but he's remembered as a beloved returning character, kind of the space rogue, I guess Han Solo type, but Han Solo hadn't been invented yet.
Yeah, but I definitely remember him being more of an asshole.
Yeah, probably. So neither of us have seen this episode in a while, so I don't know how to comment on it. I believe it has something to do with slave robots that look like young women.
Or was that the other episode with him?
I don't know. Well, Mud's Women kind of suggests that, maybe, but...
I guess we'll find out next time.
Yeah, though it was this was one of the ones that they were considering to start the entire series with. This was on the short list for, this is the first episode we're going to show.
Because sex appeal?
I guess. Oh, it gets better. Keep telling yourself it gets better. Eventually, we'll be the next gen.
Yeah, it's just a rough start here.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Next time on Watchers of Tomorrow, we meet a space rogue, and it's kind of awkward. You have been listening to Watchers of Tomorrow, a podcast on science fiction media. You may find Gepwin on youtube.com/Gepwin and on Twitter at Gepwin, spelled Gepwin. You may find me, Dr. Isix, on youtube.com/Dr. Isix, spelled DRIZIXS, and Twitter at IsixLP. Music is Waveform by DRKRN and Maury's Principle by the same. If you enjoyed our podcast, make sure to subscribe for more, and share the experience with your friends, families, enemies, and alien overlords. If you feel you are suffering from transporter syndrome, please be aware that the next time you step off the transporter, the you that is will no longer exist.